Oh, yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. Yep, we are recording now. I see it. All right.
Yep,
Thank you guys for bearing with us on that. So we've been doing a weekly Coffee with Catalyst with our own clients, and we've been very thankful for Caitlin to bringing us in over the years to do different things with the Regional Foundation Center. So this was an opportunity to meet virtually. And Caitlin, as our host, did you want to say a few words about the Regional Foundation Center?
Sure. Thanks so much, Cindy and Liz, for putting this together and helping some of our Regional Foundation Center patrons. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with the Regional Foundation Center, we're a nonprofit resource center at the Free Library. We're trying to figure out how to do our work virtually at the moment, as I'm sure many of you are. But for those of you who aren't aware, we are offering access to Foundation Directory Online Essential remotely. So if you're looking to research funding opportunities, you can do that from home or wherever you're working. And if you have any questions related to, what's going on, resources through the library, how the Regional Foundation Center can help, please feel free to reach out. We're here for you. We'd love to hear from you, what successes you've had, what struggles you've been having. So please feel free to reach out. Our email address is nonprofit@freelibrary.org. So thanks again for hosting this with us, Cindy and Liz.
Thank you. Last week we had met and we had talked about the CARES Act and the different provisions as they affect nonprofits. And as we were just speaking with Sarah, we realized that some of you may be on one side or the other of receiving funds. And our hope is that if you have applied and you didn't get funded in the last round, that you would be funded in this round. Our focus today is to look at financial management and financial leadership in times of crisis. There are no easy ways to figure this out. One of the things that we shared at our session last year, this is from McKinsey. You can see the link here, and that will be available on the slides so you can read the full report. And this is somewhat similar to what I've seen a number of economists and things that overall there's 9, they have 9 different possibilities depending on what happens with either the virus getting worse or better or the economy getting worse or better. But generally, most people are saying, something in these 4 quadrants that are in gray. If there's a recurrence of the virus, that will slow economic growth, but this kind of U-shaped with a little bit of bumpiness. The very best would be more of a V shape that we turn around pretty quickly. And generally what people are saying is, over 18 to 24 months. So when we're thinking about, how do we plan for the future, it's of course very uncertain because, businesses as a nonprofits did not have 24 months of cash on hand. So what does this look like? How do we navigate this time? For some of your cases, or for some nonprofits and for some businesses, it's going to be extremely difficult if they have to completely cease operations, and if donations completely cease. That's some very, very hard decisions need to be made. The focus of our time today talks about if you are able to do some operations, or as soon as you're able to operate, what would that look like for you? And from a financial standpoint, what tools and resources would you have? And again, our assumption is somewhere in these 4 quadrants. So we want to look at planning, and we want to think about this as triage. So right away, what do we have to do right away? Think about the right away period is pretty now until mid-May, or now until we're able to open up again, depending on when Philadelphia can open up again. That possibly could be mid-June, and what does that look like? Short term could be end of summer or end of 2020, depending on when you're able to resume operations or get back to more robust operations. Midterm and long term. And you'll see a lot of similarities between these time periods, but generally when we think about how to handle things, by putting some of your thoughts into these different buckets, what do I have to do now? What do I have to do in the short term, midterm, and long term? It can help sort out all the many different things that might be going through your head. So immediate. Of those of you on the line, who is still open? you can pop that in the chat box if you're still open and able to continue, whether virtually or and who is closed? We have our chat. Oh, good. Open virtually, still open, open virtually. Thank you. Is anybody on the line closed that you're not able to operate? And then is anybody else partial? Okay, I think I got everybody. Thank you. So when we think about what does that look like? So if you're still open virtually, are you going to retain your employees? If you're still able to deliver operations, it's very difficult to reduce your employee time. So then you're trying to think, what kind of resources are available for my nonprofit so that I can pay my employees and keep serving clients? What does that communication look like? Some of the things that we're looking at will be planning for cash flow and how do we project out our cash flow. We're trying to figure out communications. How are we going to communicate with our clients? A number of our clients have said that they're getting so many more requests for services. If in the past you've only been able to serve 40 clients in a month, now you're getting 40 more requests for your services. If prior to this you could only serve 40 clients, it's going to be very difficult to all of a sudden start serving 80 clients. So you have two choices. One is to think about, is there a different way we can provide our services that takes less time? You know, how do we look at that? Or, you know, will we have to say no to some people? Obviously, very difficult choices. Also talking about communications with donors, funders, and payers, and what that communication looks like. We'll dig in deeper into that. Whatever plan you come up with, you need to be in contact with your board, talking with your board. If you're deciding to furlough or reduce employee time, you're going to need to talk to your board. That's something that you'll want to make sure you have your board sign off on. Any questions on that? For short term, you're going to be thinking about cash management and ongoing communications. And then for immediate, whoops, sorry guys. So let's talk about cash flow management. What does that look like? We're going to think about what cash do we currently have on hand, looking at your bank account. If you have a line of credit, what credit is available to you? If you happen to own your own building and you might be able to, you know, possibly could you apply for some money in your building if your building is paid off? You know, where do you have resources to get credit? So you want to maximize your credit, maximize your cash. List all of your expenses, and then you're going to look at all of your expenses and decide what expenses do you absolutely have to pay and what expenses could be paid over time. A number of people use the QuickBooks accounting system, and with QuickBooks you could run a report and look and see what expenses did we pay last April, last May, last June, last July, and look and see if these are the expenses that I paid last year, this is what's going to be coming up. What do I absolutely have to pay right now? What could be paid over time? And how do we look at that? Likewise, revenues. Are we sure that, you know, what revenues are we sure we can count on? If you have some government contracts, you know, will that continue? Or if you have donors. Sometimes people say, well, I can't call donors and ask for support, so I'm not going to do anything. It's important to be in communication with your donors and to let them know what's happening. You might not necessarily be calling them and saying, you know, I need money right now. We're desperately, you know, we're desperate for money. But just to call them and say, you know, we want to keep you informed of what's going on, what's happening with you. The communications that I'm getting from donors are things like, we want to let you know if there's anything we can do to help you at this time. But we also want to let you know how we're responding. And it's kind of a soft, if you will, a soft ask. If you have major donors, you can contact them, call them, discuss with them what's happening, and then schedule a cash flow projection. So what does that look like? A cash flow projection is your best estimate and the effect on cash. So you're saying at the beginning of April, I had $80,000. And I do realize that depending on the size of your organization, if your organization is much smaller, you can just take a zero off and say 8,000. Normally, I'm projecting that I'll get 60,000 in, my expenses are 70, ending balance will be 70. This balance gets carried over to May. So you basically projected out, this is what we think we're going to get each month. Looking at this, we think that revenues will fade out. Expenses, we can control some expenses, but we can't control all. So right now it's April, our beginning balance is 80,000. Over the 4 months, we're going to use more than we bring in. So our cash ending balance will be 24,000. So one of the things that you want to think about with this situation is, initially you might look at this and think, well, this isn't too bad. The first month we're only, using $10,000, but you can see how this compounds over time, and the losses and the lower income can affect you. But you can also see why it's so important to project your cash so that you know what things look like, and you're going to continually roll this forward. So this is just a slice of 4 months, but you want to project this for 5, 6. You want to project this out for the next 18 to 24 months and identify at what point will we step in, because you realize you can't continue this trend much longer. So at what point are you going to have to make deeper expense cuts? Our clients who've worked through this exercise have told us they dread it. It's extremely hard to do, but getting that worst case scenario on paper, and just getting it out and seeing what's happening, once they're done, they just feel like they've identified what they can control and what they can't control, and their ability to take action instead of having all these unknowns in your head. I'm going to stop and ask, do you have questions on this, or what are some of the issues you're running into? Okay. All right. So we'll go to the next thing. So as the months pass, you're going to update this and roll forward. So initially in our projection, we thought that at the end of April, we would have $70,000 in cash. We got to May 1st, we looked at our bank account, we actually have $74,000. Well, now this changes our projection. Things have gotten better than we expected. We can roll forward actual. So as each month passes, you're going to update May for actual, June for actual, so that you're continually changing the way this number looks. This is a monthly projection. I would recommend that you have a weekly projection. So again, this goes back to if we were at the beginning of April, we still end up with our projected number of 70. And here's these totals. If you were to go back to their slide, 80, 60, 70 equal April. But now we've projected week by week. And we're saying, because you need to know when you're going to have to make hard choices on cutting certain expenses, and what that looks like and what we need to do. So this week by week projection, and then on top of that, you're going to be staying on top of that. So if we're in week, we're in week 4, if you've been hitting your targets every week and gotten the money in that you had hoped to get, come week 4, I have clients and they're looking at daily, they're looking at what came in every single day. If you use the QuickBooks accounting system, QuickBooks can notify you, I think, especially if you're online. Well, yes, you'd have to be online. If you have QuickBooks online, it can notify you, I believe, by text what your deposits are, or you can just, ask your bookkeeper or check to see, what money is coming in every day. This, as stressful as it is, the sooner you can make these decisions and stay on top of it, you can keep your organizations going on that. When we talk about projecting revenues, you might have several different scenarios. So you're not going to have several different scenarios for a week, but for your monthly projection, if you're projecting out over 18 to 24 months, you might say if we get 100% of everything we think we'll get, our normal budget, this is what it would look like. If we have a 20% reduction, this is what it will look like. If we have a 50% reduction, this is what it will look like. These are going to be, I'm not sure each of your situations and how detailed your revenue section are, but you're going to pick your broad categories when you're thinking about these things. One of the things you want to think about is for your organization and for the trending in your revenues, how far of a deep dive makes sense. I'm presenting a very simplified version. For some of you, the simplified version might be just the ticket. It would be just enough for you to project things out. For others, if underneath this layer of individual contributions are several major donors that may have been hit harder than others, you're gonna need to dig a little deeper with that. But for your top line, just working through this is probably going to suffice. Are there any questions? Okay. When you project your expenses are really going to come off of your revenue. So what we have at the top here is the revenue under the three scenarios. So here's our revenue. 100% would be 35,000, 80, 28, 50, 17. Because what we're saying is, if our revenue declines by 50%, what do we need to do with our expenses? So 180, these are our choices. We have fixed expenses such as rent and utilities. And while perhaps eventually you can stop those for the short term or perhaps even for the midterm, you're still probably going to rent your building. You're still probably going to have utilities. So those are fixed expenses. Those are expenses that they're not discretionary. We have to pay these expenses. Can we possibly call our landlord and ask if we could pay our rent later for the next 3 months? Possibly. The problem is every single entity is affected by this. So your landlord is affected by this. So it's definitely worth talking to them and seeing what they can do. It never hurts to ask, but you have to be prepared that the answer might be no, because they might have a mortgage with the bank that they have to pay. But even if they could say, that they can give you a grace period of 2 months, that's going to preserve your cash flow. So you've listed the expenses you absolutely have to pay. This is your budget. We get everything in, 35,000 less 1,800. Now we have 33,000 that we can work with. This is your normal budget. Normally our monthly budget is we have salaries and benefits for 30,000, supplies, even Steven. If we went 80%, well, we have this much remaining. We recognize that we're going to have to cut. We can make some cuts. Should we make cuts in supplies? Should we make cuts in salaries? Maybe you said we only need $500 of supplies. If your worst case is 50%, what does that look like? We're going to cut supplies to nothing. We're going to change what we do, and or can we get supplies donated? And this is what we need to cut salaries and benefits. So this is an option. Under this option, what you're saying is no matter what happens to your revenue, you're going to hold your expenses in line, and you're going to modify your expenses because of your revenue. This is a very simplified example. I recognize that in a perfect world, you don't know that revenues are going to be down to 28,000 until the following month. So there's going to be a lag by the time you realize our revenues are down. What do we need to do with salaries and benefits? A more realistic example is that you're going to say, if we have revenues go down, we're going to use our savings. In this particular example, you may have decided we're going to keep salaries and benefits the same, but we will reduce supplies, but we don't want to change the salaries and benefits of our people. You could do all sorts of things. You could say we're going to reduce salaries and benefits by 10%, you know, whatever. But you realize if we keep salaries and benefits the same, we're going to use our savings. If we had $20,000 of cash reserves, you know, if we get 100%, we're fine. We're going to keep our cash reserves. If we get 80% of our revenues, we're going to use $39.50 of our cash reserves, and we're going to have a balance of $16,000. If we get half of what we planned, though, we're going to be down to $5,900. So you need to know what types of reserves we have on hand, and then you can make different options. Questions, thoughts? I have another screen, so when my head turns, I'm looking at this other screen. If you're wondering what I'm looking at, until I'm looking to see if there's anything in the chat box. I know these are hard decisions. It's hard conversations. Try to get, if you're not sure about finances, get your bookkeeper involved. Get your treasurer on your board involved. You can call your accounting firm and say, I just want to bounce some ideas off of you. There's a couple of, there's a number of different things you can do. So we're going to use our savings. The other option would be some sort of hybrid approach. We will reduce salaries and benefits, and we'll use some of our savings. But as you can see, by looking at these three different approaches, now instead of all of these things running around in your head in the middle of the night or throughout the day, and this, what would we do? What would we do? You've put something on paper and you've said, if this happens, this is what we'll do. If something else happens, this is what we'll do. You might not know for sure what you'll do, but you'll have a couple of different scenarios that you've mapped out. You're going to discuss this with your board, and everybody will be on the same page. If certain things happen, these are the actions that we'll take. And by doing this, you're going to preserve your organization to get through this difficult time that by and large, most people believe that we will emerge successfully from sometime in the next year to 2 years. Questions, thoughts? When we talk about expense management, back in 2008, a number of our clients told us then, and people are still telling us now, they will talk to their staff and they'll say, we're thinking we're going to have to lay some people off, and their staff will come back and say, no, we will all take a 20% pay cut instead of laying off individual people. Because of what's happening right now, some people will say, yes, we would like to be laid off. The two of us would like to be laid off because we have children who are having to school at home. And because of the advantages from unemployment, we can make, sadly, in the nonprofit world, people are able right now, not normally, but right now, they're able to make more on unemployment, at least through July 31st, than employed. So some people might say, instead of cutting the pay across the board, can you please lay two of us off? We can get our kids their schooling, and if it's a furlough, there's a sense that they'll be hired back. So you're looking to conserve cash, you're looking to manage the needs of everybody that works for you. So think about those things. We talked about the vendors, the rent, the landlord, just calling people, having those conversations. When you talk to your landlord, when you talk to your vendors, ask them what's happening with them, what's going on with them as well. A lot of people, we're all in this together, and how that works out. Think about expenses that you can avoid: dues, memberships, subscriptions. Perhaps you, as a gesture of goodwill, you're part of the local chamber of commerce. Is that something that you defer for 6 months and you join at a later date? Some people are surprised to see that they have automatic reorders on supplies that they didn't realize they had. You could have credit cards with fees, bank service charges that you could avoid. Are there maintenance contracts on some equipment that you never use? If you always use the maintenance contract, don't let it go. But think about different things. Cooperative purchasing, putting out a list of things that you need for other things, a number of different things. But brainstorming with your team and with your board. Has anybody come up with any expense management ideas so far?
We actually have a question, Cindy, regarding planning for the gala next year. Thoughts about what should we be thinking about in terms of that planning? If our goal is to preserve cash and cash reserve, should we move forward with some of those expenses that we might have to incur?
Can I ask if the gala is in the beginning of the spring or the fall?
Spring.
Okay. If it was in the fall, it would be an easier decision. As far as expenses, are they expenses like to reserve a venue?
Oh, I think, okay, I'm off mute.
Yes.
Okay.
I know, and I can put my video on. I have a lot going on today. Yeah, so this is actually going to be our second time doing the gala. So we don't really know, but it generated a lot of money for us last year, and we do need to fundraise. But then if we put it out there and put a hold on a space and hire someone to help with the event planning, and it's just, is that going to be a loss? And then are people going to be hesitant about attending these things? There's just so much that's unknown. That's like, do we proceed with planning or do we put everything on hold? And if you put things on hold and you don't give yourself enough time to plan, then you might not have as an effective event, as a successful event. So I'm just at a loss.
Yeah, that's a hard thing to figure out. I would think about the window, the minimum window of time that you would need to plan and ramp things up. And then also consider, is spring still the best time? Should it be, is there another time that, are you better off moving it to the following fall?
Yeah.
I only know what I see in the media. I mean, it does sound like a vaccine could be sometime in 2021. Maybe as early as January, but it sounds like they're talking about by June or later. But you're right. You don't want to, obviously you don't want to put a deposit down on a venue at this stage, but decide what's the smallest ramp that you would need to have your gala and how you can make, how you can really compress that. But you're right. It would be very difficult to start putting expenses into that right now.
Yeah.
And doing that.
And you may find that some of the vendors would be willing to hold a space for you without a deposit because it's guaranteeing them business in the next year. So having that open communication, they might say we can hold it for you for 30 days or 90 days without a deposit, but then after that, or they may be able to say we usually require a 20% deposit, but we'll take, a refundable 10% deposit with the understanding that if someone else comes along who can, fully meet that obligation, that they would have preference over you. So just having that communication might be helpful with the vendors.
And relatedly, I was even thinking that, it's hard to know what people's activity is going to be after, post the confinement, whether like people are just excited and they'll be buying things and wanting to go places, or whether they're going to be reserved. But I don't know, folks who had galas planned this year that they couldn't hold anymore. I don't know what the data shows around what people just basically, they already purchased the ticket, then the organization just go ahead and keep it, or was it what kind of loss people incurred? So I also want to figure out if there has to be a plan B, is it going to hurt us more, or is it going to be like your supporters are generally going to be like, it's fine, we understand, keep the money from the ticket sales?
That's a really good question. I think in the short term, we've heard some organizations moving to a virtual gala or a stay-at-home type of a gala, and they've reached out to sponsors, and many of the sponsors, especially the corporate sponsors, have said, we've already allocated, we've already paid for that sponsorship, so go ahead and hold it or keep it. Same with tickets, but it's a great opportunity for you to have a touch point with your corporate sponsors and your partners and your ticket purchasers to have a conversation with them about it. But it's really, it's an unknown, unfortunately. Does anyone else have any thoughts or ideas about that? Comments? Experiences?
Thank you. It is a good question. Midterm, you're building on some of the principles that we already have, but budgeting. A number of nonprofits have a June 30th year end, so you're starting to put together your June 30th, 2021 budget. And what does that look like? So it's going to be very similar to the principles that we just talked about. Usually you probably just have one budget, but you're going to have, a budget that's your very best guess. And then you might have a budget that's a worst case budget. And then you're going to pick something. It could be between your best guess budget and your worst guess budget, but you're going to, you're probably going to have 3 different options. And you and your board will want to decide, how will we label those 3 options? In our example, we used 100%, 80%, and 50%. You could use other, 3 other types of parameters. The other thing that you want to think about midterm is program management. When we first got on the line, we were talking with Sarah, and she was able to pivot back to online because initially when your nonprofit was founded, you were primarily online. So you were able to make that change. Somebody else mentioned, I think, I'm sorry, your name escapes me. I know it started with a D, that you're doing telehealth. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Yes, we are doing telehealth. Unfortunately, we see primarily or exclusively uninsured patients, so we're taking in 0 income from that. But it's a necessary service, so we're obviously going to continue providing it. And then we're also needing to project, once clinic reopens, it's highly likely that the people that are coming into the clinic are going to be unable to afford to pay, because the people we're seeing are primarily undocumented immigrants who are the ones that lost their job in restaurant industry and all of that, and don't qualify for any of the support programs that have come out. Like, they're not getting the, I don't remember what the bonus money is called right now. Sorry. And, they don't qualify for unemployment or basically anything. So even once things open up, I think that we need to project a longer term issue for our office.
Yeah, yeah. So thinking about now what those programs look like, how you'll deliver your services, how will that change? You had a good point. You had mentioned, once the clinic opens up, when will that be? What will it look like? Pennsylvania's outlined the red, yellow, and green stages. So what will yellow look like for you in your situation? Continued communications. Over and over again, we're hearing you can't communicate enough. Keeping in touch with everybody. Your donor interactions. I had heard the other day the nonprofit had mentioned that they called the donor and the donor was out of work, and the nonprofit said, well, how about you take a look at my LinkedIn page? If you see anybody on my LinkedIn page that you would like an introduction to, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And this is the nonprofit executive director extending that offer to their donor. And the donor was just so grateful. And it was something relatively simple that the nonprofit could offer that gave the donor encouragement at a difficult time. So just that reaching out and talking to your donors, I do realize it is asking, you are trying to manage yourself, your family, your employees, your program participants, and now I'm asking you to care for your donors as well. And it's a lot, but it is, people are very resilient. And as hard as it is, we will all continue moving forward. That's why you dialed in today. You're looking to interact with other people. and get input and work together to figure these things out. Oh, we had talked about this. So, and this is a link to this. HBR is the Harvard Business Review, and they had done an article about nonprofit fundraising in the age of coronavirus. And they basically said this is a time to be bold. Let donors know what's going on. Don't be afraid to ask. There was a study that came out that showed in 2008, although it was very hard on nonprofits, by and large, the trend continued, with donations continued upward, that people saw the need and they added giving. I know that the reality is a number of you have seen your donations dropped off and seen your income drop off. So it's, how does that rebound? What does that look like in the next 18 months so that that line does overall go up? We do see a lot of money flowing into the area, but it's flowing in right now for needs, or depending on the population that you serve, you might not see those funds immediately. But keeping your ear to the ground, seeing what's out there, and looking for ways that volunteers can do things, even if they're at home. No easy answers, but thinking about these things, brainstorming with your board. Going virtual so that you can engage, so people can learn about you. These people might be engaging and learning about you now in a different way. They might not necessarily be donors now, but will they become donors, 6 months, 9 months? Are these people that you've gotten engaged with you that will, they'll be able to contribute to you 2 years from now? As far as the musical, Sarah, you could probably jump in on this. Earlier, we had a client with a symphony, and somebody had advised them, to have a 10-minute performance with a violinist where they play a piece and then they talk about their craft. Liz had shared something where these people that normally have, you can physically go on site to see their goats. For $100, you can have a goat or a llama come to your Zoom meeting and show up as a person, and people are buying it. So, these are just wacky ideas. Online gaming events, as far as like video games, there's a big market for online gaming events. This come to our attention about 2 years ago, and we have heard of some people getting some money from that. I don't know what's involved in that. A couple of different things. Again, these all take time and effort, but trying to find out what works best for you. You're not going to be able to do all of these things, but what would be a good fit for your organization? Any comments or thoughts as far as what you've seen or thought about? Thank you. Virtual programming, we were talking about telehealth. The problem, as you had mentioned in your case, is that you're not being compensated to deliver that programming. So that's a challenge. New needs, there's new needs, there's different things that are coming out. What talents and skills do you have with your people that can be repurposed? What knowledge do you have? You have knowledge that other people don't necessarily have, and how can you meet those needs? Long term, whenever we do strategic planning with clients and they have some difficult decisions to make, one of the kind of formative questions is, it's 2 years from now and you look back, what have you learned? What do you wish you had done differently? What do you wish you did now? Not, like I said before, these are not easy questions. I understand that, but it's just a different way of asking some of the questions. A lot of our questions that we asked in the last couple of slides were looking forward. This is just a different way to frame those questions to perhaps get the creative juices flowing. Wanted to share some resources. The Nonprofit Finance Fund has a really nice slide presentation and audio presentation. It goes into much greater depth than this presentation that we went through today does, and it really spells out some of these pieces. The National Council of Nonprofits website has a number of resources. This grant space. As Caitlin had mentioned, you can access the foundation directory online. If there's any other resources that you have found helpful, please let us know, and we'll get that out to the group as well. Any other thoughts or questions? Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this morning, and please take care.